Hello, everybody, and welcome to Edy Hurst's podcast version of The War of the Worlds. It is me, Edy Hurst, and you're here with my version of War of the Worlds. I mean, that's the title, innit? I don't know how at this point you've gotten to chapter 15 and you're still not clear on what we do. Think of it a bit like those remixes they used to do of really famous songs in the 90s, where all they do to it is add a drum beat. Only instead of just adding a drum beat, we're putting in an original score, lots of little asides, comedy sketches, a new musical comedy song inspired by each chapter, and we have lots of my personal comedy friends on, and some fantastic musical comedians bringing on their own creations. Here we are, chapter 15. There's 2 chapters left until the end of book 1. Ah, I'm sure you're all saying. What happens this time? It's chapter 15, What Happened in Surrey. And what did happen in Surrey? Just have some patience, that's what the chapter's about. We have an absolute cavalcade of guests, which is exciting because I like saying the word cavalcade. Say it yourself. Go on, I'll give you a couple of seconds. It feels good, right? Anyway, guests on, we've got the Loremen podcast. So we had Alistair Beckett-King on in an earlier episode. Now we've got the other half of Loremen, which is James Shakeshaft joining us. We've also got a fantastic guest song by Amelia Baylor. And keen listeners might spot a little Tommy Burgess coming back as the Curate. So, I shall not say any more about what to expect in this chapter. I will say, please give a rating and a review for the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Spotify, you cannot give it a rating on there. It's very frustrating, but if you head over to something like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, you can do it on there. You can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook if you want. I'm at Edy Hurst, and there'll be latest news there. Or drop me an email. Let me know what you're enjoying about the show. It's edyhurst@gmail.com. Ado shall be taken no further, and let us begin. Chapter 15. What had happened in Surrey? It was while the curate had sat and talked so wildly to me under the hedge in the flat meadows near Halliford, and while my brother was watching the fugitives stream over Westminster Bridge, that the Martians had resumed the offensive. Look, I know a lot of you might be getting confused, being like, hey, how does this add up? What day is this now? And I get it. But H.G.Wells actually put in a pretty tight timeline for figuring out where everything is. It really adds up if you go through it.
Martians landed here by Thursday. People gathered round here on Thursday. Hooray also came around on Thursday. Narrator ran away, fell asleep in a ditch, and now that is Friday. Fighting big and properly Saturday. Also went to Leatherhead Saturday. Lost a card, hit at home with a soldier, and that is Saturday. Sunday, went with the soldier to Weybridge. Had a lunch of meat and biscuit sandwich. Martians attacked to the water. We had stole a boat, found a curate. Now it's Monday.
So it's Monday. We're at Monday now. I don't know about you. I found the London digression a bit confusing for the time. So I hope that clears it up for you. So far as one can ascertain from the conflicting accounts that have been put forth, the majority of them remain busied with preparations in the Horsell pit until 9 that night, hurrying on some operations that disengaged huge volumes of green smoke. But 3 certainly came out about 8 o'clock, and, advancing slowly and cautiously, made their way through Byfleet and Pireford towards Ripley and Weybridge, and so came in sight of the expectant batteries against the setting sun. These Martians did not advance in a body, but in a line, each perhaps 1.5 miles from his nearest fellow. They communicated with each other by means of siren-like howls, running up and down the scale from one note to another. It was this howling and firing of the guns at Ripley and St. George's Hill that we heard at Upper Halliford. Just to let you know, Upper Halliford, it's just below Heathrow Airport, so it's pretty close to London now. The Ripley gunners, unseasoned artillery volunteers who ought never to have been placed in such a position, fired one wild, premature, ineffectual volley, and bolted on horse and foot through the deserted village, while the Martian, without using his heat ray, walked serenely over their guns, stepped gingerly among them, passed in front of them, and so came unexpectedly upon the guns in Paintshill Park,
which he destroyed. The St. George's Hill men, however, were better led or of a better metal. Hidden by a pine wood as they were, they seem to have been quite unsuspected by the Martian nearest to them. They laid their guns as deliberately as if they had been on parade, and fired at about 1,000 yards range.
Just a quick shout out to the idea of metal, which is mettle. It's a sort of Victorian idea of like the stuff that you're made of. You know, like what makes you you. It's kind of, looking back, it's kind of a bit like a sort of toxic masculinity thing. You know, it's like your core substance and what makes you worth value. So, I mean, just watch out for that sort of phrasing. That's just a heads up for that.
The shells flashed all around him, and he was seen to advance a few paces, stagger, and go down. Everybody yelled together, and the guns were reloaded in frantic haste. The overthrown Martian set up a prolonged ululation, and immediately a second glittering giant, answering him, appeared over the trees to the south.
I had to read this a few times before recording it to figure out what the him meant in that. And it's like, Wells means the Martian. The Martian is a he, apparently, which just seems like a weird decision. Like, why bring gender into the Martians? Isn't it? They've got enough going on, right? They're like these weird octopus things. How does he know whether there are men or women on their planet? It seems a bit presumptive.
It would seem that a leg of the tripod had been smashed by one of the shells. The whole of the second volley flew wide of the Martian on the ground, and, simultaneously, both his companions brought their heat rays to bear on the battery. The ammunition blew up. The pine trees all about the guns flashed into fire, and only one or two of the men who were already running over the crest of the hill escaped. After this, it would seem that the three took counsel together and halted, and the scouts who were watching them report that they remained absolutely stationary for the next half hour. The Martian who had been overthrown crawled tediously out of his hood, a small brown figure, oddly suggestive from that distance of a speck of blight.
Hi everybody, it's me, the Explaining Lad. So blight is a thing that you find on leaves, on trees and plants and that sort of thing. So it's like a bit of brown that you have on a green leaf. It's like a disease. It's something that takes you over and affects you. A little bit like how I feel my relationship with Suzanne did for me. I don't know what happened. I feel like I had a break from reality, but me and Mrs. Ladd, we're working through our issues now, and it just feels great. It feels like a big weight has been taken off my chest. Like I just went, had a bit of a wobble, which we're all allowed to do. Anyway, so that's blight, and I'll speak to you in a bit. I've just got to go to a counselling session.
And apparently engaged in the repair of his support. About 9 he had finished, for his cowl was then seen above the trees again.
Another thing about giving the Martian like a gender is it adds a colour and a sort of personality to him that I wasn't quite expecting. You know, I'm quite glad he's pulled through in a way. You know, little guy, little brown bit of blight. That'll be his name. Maybe we'll call him Little Blighter. Little Blighter. You know, that's more detail than most of the soldiers have been given.
It was a few minutes past 9 that night when these 3 sentinels were joined by 4 of the Martians, each carrying a thick black tube. A similar tube was handed to each of the 3, and the 7 proceeded to distribute themselves at equal distances along a curved line between St. George's Hill, Weybridge, and the village of Send, southwest of Ripley.
Sorry, just let me check the maths on that. So 4 plus 3 equals 7, and so how many black tubes will they need? 7. Yeah, it checks out. He's done it again. He's done it again. The maths is solid.
A dozen rockets sprang out of the hills before them so soon as they began to move, and warned the waiting batteries about Ditton and Esher. At the same time, 4 of their fighting machines, similarly armed with tubes, crossed the river, and 2 of them, black against the western sky, came into sight of myself and the curate as we hurried wearily and painfully along the road that runs northward out of Halliford. They moved, as it seemed to us, upon a cloud, for a milky mist covered the fields and rose to a third of their height.
Okay, welcome back to the Esher Arms. We've got the open mic poetry slam tonight, so please, without further ado, can I welcome our first poet to the stage? Okay, thank you. Hello. They moved, as it seemed to us, upon a cloud, for a milky mist covered the fields and roused to a third of their height.
At this sight, the curate cried faintly in his throat and began running. But I knew it was no good running from a Martian, and I turned aside and crawled through dewy nettles and brambles into the broad ditch by the side of the road. He looked back, saw what I was doing, and turned to join me.
I mean, the logic of not running, that's sound, but the narrator choosing to hide under the most flammable thing he could have found with creatures with heat rays, I'm not sure if that checks out. And also, I mean, listen, Curate, if you saw the narrator jumping off a bridge, I suppose you'd do that too. Have a think, mate.
The two halted. The nearer was standing and facing Sunbury, the remoter being a grey indistinctness towards the evening star, away towards Staines. The occasional howling of the Martians had ceased. They took up their positions in the huge crescent about the cylinders in absolute silence. It was a crescent with 12 miles between its horns. Never since the devising of gunpowder was the beginning of battle so still. To us and to an observer about Ripley, it would have had precisely the same effect. The Martians seemed in solitary possession of the darkling night, lit only as if by the slender moon, the stars, the afterglow of the daylight and the ruddy glare from St. George's Hill, and the woods of Painshill, but facing that crescent everywhere, at Staines, Hounslow, Ditton, Esher, Ockham, behind hills and woods south of the river, and across the flat green meadows to the north of it. Wherever a cluster of trees or village houses gave sufficient cover, the guns were waiting. The signal rockets burst and rained their sparks through the night and vanished, and the spirit of all those watching batteries rose to a tense expectation. The Martians had but to advance into the line of fire, and instantly those motionless black forms of men, those guns glittering so darkly in the early night, would explode into a thunderous fury of battle.
Yeah, because I mean that's worked out so well for the humans so far.
No doubt the thought that was uppermost in 1,000 of those vigilant minds, even as it was uppermost in mine, was the riddle: how much they understood us. Did they grasp that we and our millions were organised, disciplined, working together? Or did they interpret our spurts of fire, the sudden stinging of our shells, our steady investment of their encampment, as we should the furious unanimity of the onslaught in a disturbed hive of bees? Did they dream they might exterminate us? At that time, no one knew what food they needed.
That's a weird thing to mention. I'm sure that won't turn up at any point later in the book. I'd just forget that fact about them needing food to eat. I'm sure that won't come up later. Absolutely not important whatsoever. Don't even know why I'm bringing it up, to be honest.
100 such questions struggled together in my mind as I watched that vast sentinel shape. And in the back of my mind was the sense of all the huge unknown and hidden forces Londonward. Had they prepared pitfalls? Were the powder mills at Hounslow ready as a snare? Would the Londoners have the heart and courage to make a greater Moscow of their mighty province of houses?
And I understand that sometimes you feel like you're not being listened to, even though I'm saying that I'm hearing you. Just a minute, sorry. Hey guys, sorry, I'm just in the middle of the counting session. What Greater Moscow means is it's a reference to the Napoleonic Wars. Ooh, so it's in the 1800s, the early 1800s, so it's the French invasion of Russia around 1812, the early 1800s, when Napoleon went in to attack the Russians to try and take it over. And what happened in Moscow was that a lot of the population left the houses. They just all left their home, up sticks and ran because they knew that the French were coming in going to take it over. So if they could leave that to stop them and keep them back, they could reinforce the military and create more of a base to push the French troops back. Okay, now I really have to go. What do you mean I don't give you space? I prioritise you.
Then, after an interminable time, as it seemed to us, crouching and peering through the hedge, came a sound like the distant concussion of a gun. Another nearer, and then another. And then the Martian beside us raised his tube on high and discharged it, gunwise, with a heavy report that made the ground heave. The one towards Staines answered him. There was no flash, no smoke, simply that loaded detonation. I was so excited by these heavy minute guns following one another that I so far forgot my personal safety and my scalded hands as to clamber up into the hedge and stare towards Sunbury. As I did so, a second report followed, and a big projectile hurtled overhead towards Hounslow. I expected at least to see smoke or fire, or some such evidence of its work. But all I saw was the deep blue sky above, with one solitary star, and the white mist spreading wide and low beneath. And there had been no crash, no answering explosion. The silence was restored. The minute lengthened to 3.
What has happened?
Said the curate, standing up beside me. Heaven knows, said I.
Absolutely delicious. Even when they're seeing an unknown weaponry being used by Martians, the narrator still finds a way to take the Lord's name in vain to wind the curator up. Honestly, it is the most simmering resentment.
A bat flickered by and vanished.
Batman?
A distant tumult of shouting began and ceased. I looked again at the Martian, and saw he was now moving eastward along the riverbank, with a swift, rolling motion. Every moment I expected the fire of some hidden battery to spring upon him. But the evening calm was unbroken. The figure of the Martian grew smaller as he receded, and presently the mist and the gathering night had swallowed him up. By a common impulse we clambered higher. Towards Sunbury was a dark appearance, as though a conical hill had suddenly come into being there, hiding our view of the farther country. And then, remoter across the river, over Walton, we saw another such summit. These hill-like forms grew lower and broader even as we stared. Moved by a sudden thought, I looked northward, and there I perceived a third of these cloudy black kopjes had risen.
And I just promise that I will never take you for granted again. Sorry, just one moment. Hey guys, so a copy? Well, it's actually, apparently it's a South African word. It means like a small hill, like a cone area. So basically, it's just another word to describe the sort of conical hills that you've seen. Okay, I'll get back to it. What was I saying? Oh yeah, you will come second for no one.
Everything had suddenly become very still.
No, it hadn't, you liar. It's been really still for loads of this. You're playing with the timing. All of this, it's all about the tension and the stillness that you're not expecting. Duh, brain.
Far away to the southeast, marking the quiet, we heard the Martians hooting to one another. And then the air quivered again with the distant thud of their guns. But the earthly artillery made no reply. Now at the time we could not understand these things, but later I was to learn the meaning of these ominous kopjes that gathered in the twilight. Maybe it's just me speaking from the point of view of somebody who has to make all of the sounds and score this, but this chapter's had a lot of noises in it so far. I feel like more noise and more description of noise, especially from the Martians, as we have in previous chapters. And with that in mind, I thought it'd be a good idea to invite my personal comedy friends, trademark, the Loremen podcast, both of them this time, so Alistair and James, to share with us some of the many spooky sounds that exist within folklore that they've studied. So here we go.
Hello, my name is Alistair Beckett-King, and I am one half of the Loremen podcast.
And I'm James Shakeshaft, and I am the other half of said Loremen podcast.
And it's a pleasure to have you both on. Thank you. Because, Alistair, you've been on already. And it's great to have you here, James, so thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
I love saying thank you for having me, because it really makes me think that like a party bag is coming.
Yeah.
You know, like at the end of a kid's party. Like a little bag with a slice of cake and maybe a small sort of Kinder Egg style toy.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's still, we've got that to look forward
This
to.
is a check I cannot cash. I'm so sorry.
Are you saying there's not a party bag at the end of this podcast?
I mean, if you have one on your person,
Yes.
just carrying it around.
You can't BYO party bag. I'm sorry.
You can't party your own bag.
That's not being a good host.
When does a bag start being? It has to be given out at a party, doesn't it?
Yes.
But it can't just be a backpack that you're given at a party.
No, it can't be a duffel bag.
Yeah.
Or a cake.
It can't be Sainsbury's branded, like just an orange carrier for everyone.
Yeah. You guys are, well, I'm going to say this, and then I know you're going to refute it as you're modest men. You're experts in folklore.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, we are going to refute that. We are comedians who talk about folklore on the internet, and you don't really need any qualifications to get on the internet. They let anyone do it.
Sorry, I've never heard of anyone not being an expert on the internet, so this is completely new to me.
No, I like reading pamphlets, like that cost about £2 from a little sort of tourist shop, and that's where I get most of my information from.
That's
not
amazing.
just about folklore.
The chapter that I'm doing at the moment, there's a lot of noises going on in it. And I know that that sounds strange because it is.
When I was a kid and I got my first Walkman, I had a tape of Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, and I would listen to it because I enjoyed speech stuff and I liked stories. So I'd listen to it for the story, but would always give myself nightmares with the noise of the aliens. That was so terrifying. May I?
Yeah, please do. Please do. Get ready for your mind to be blown, because in the book, rather than oola, it's alu.
Or what?
That's the opposite.
It's a cool chapter because you've got the Martians talking to one another rather than just doing the alert noise. So they speak in siren-like howls to each other.
God.
That's something. That's quite scary.
That's terrifying.
I live in South London, and the people around here are quite similar.
What are the best noises that you guys have heard in folklore? Because H.G.Wells must, obviously in his life, he had experience of noises, but in the literary world and in the world of tales being told, he must have had some idea of noises and strange noises, moreover, that could make human bones shiver at the mere thought of it.
Oh, yes.
Well, I just mentioned banshees. That's quite a famous one.
Yeah, the sirens.
Yeah, of course. Of course, the ladies.
Got those in South London as well.
The one that instantly sprang to mind, which sounds quite similar, is there's a small village called Mikkelton, and that has a phenomena called the Mikkelton Hooter.
Mickey Hoots.
Yeah, Mickey Hoots.
What's the noise?
No one knows what is the Mikkelton Hooter. It's a hooting noise.
Right, sure, that makes most sense.
In the town of Mikkelton. Some say it's caused because there's like a valley and the wind going through the valley makes this hooting noise. Other people think it's, I think, the ghost of a cow or the ghost of a man that killed a cow.
I like the so there's no evidence of the hooter. There's no evidence of the hooter itself. The existence of the hooter has been inferred from the sound of the hooting. Yeah, you hear a hoot, there must be a hooter.
Have they heard of owls? I mean, I don't want to, I love the idea of a ghost cow. I'm all for, personally, I'd rather that be the case. But it does seem like an owl is the most famous hoot that I know.
All right, if you think you can explain that supernatural occurrence, I have what I think you'll agree is a equally terrifying sound. Well, in fact, I can think of two. One of them is the Pelton Brag from, I think, the first episode of Loremen, who set up a Greet Nicker and Whinny. So imagine the sound of a horse that was a ghost. What did it sound like? It sounded like a horse. That's pretty spooky. But my favourite noisy spirit is Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
Oh yeah, of course.
Obvious, easy shoe-in, Jeff the Talking Mongoose. Yeah. And he's sort of a Ron Seal supernatural occurrence in that really you are getting what it sounds like you're getting. Like, he's called Jeff. He's a mongoose that talks. You
could put Cocky into that name and that would still... Yeah. He's a cocky.
He was also transdimensional and Indian for some reason.
Yeah, he was the fifth dimension.
It was a bit racist the way I said Indian for some reason, as if you need a reason to be Indian, as if the millions of Indian people are like Indian for some reason. So, as if that's a weirdly arbitrary decision to be Indian. Sorry about that, Indian people, and Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
Yeah, well, we'll be hearing from him.
We will, but in none of our impressions of him will we be doing an Indian accent. Just although I think, as far as we know, since he lived on the Isle of Man, he spoke with an Isle of Man or Manx accent.
Sure.
But we learned about him from Pierre Novelli. So if we try and do it, we're going to come out South African, and then we're back to racism. So let's just leave it.
So are there any other noises that you think of? Like, what would for you be the scariest noise to hear? Because this is meant to be like a terrifying noise. Ghouls and such, they're all quite a distance away. I think seems to be the recurring theme of a lot of folklore.
Yeah, it's often music. It's often the noise is sort of an alluring noise, and then like the sirens, and then you get caught.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, a lot of water spirits sit playing instruments by streams and rivers until you get pulled under.
my friends had an incident with a beast, which became nicknamed the Snuffling Beast of Lidston, and I think that was quite a scary noise.
I feel like I should jump in here because I've heard your investigative report into that, James.
Yeah, it's still on the record.
And well, based on my critical reading of the text, I think a certain amount of drugs were involved in that story as well. I think there's a pattern here.
Yeah. It was that. It was.
Is it the beast? The beast approacheth.
The beast approacheth from the darkness, though, coming towards you in a country lane on a jet black night.
Yeah, what could it be? What animal could make a
in the
snuffling
countryside
on a country lane at night? In the countryside, it's impossible to imagine.
The jury's out. There isn't even a jury. That's the terrifying part of this. There is no legal action to be taken.
The ombudsman is on call at a different mystery. Sorry. The alderman is indisposed. He's twisted his ankle on the moors. You're on your own. The bailiff? You're joking? He's in the lockup over by the big house. No one can help him. It's just you and the beast.
Yeah, you just got a gavel and...
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. I feel a lot more educated on the world of noise and what noises to watch out for.
Well, you shouldn't, but I think we've provided nothing of educational value, but it has been delightful. Thank you for having us.
Each of the Martians, standing in the great crescent I've described, has discharged, by means of the gun-like tube he carried, a huge canister over whatever hill, copse, cluster of houses, or other possible cover for guns chanced to be in front of him. Some fired only one of these, some two, as in the case of the one we had seen. The one at Ripley is said to have discharged no fewer than 5 at the time. These canisters smashed on striking the ground. They did not explode, and incontinently disengaged an enormous volume of heavy, inky vapour, coiling and pouring upwards in a huge and ebony cumulus cloud, a gaseous hill that sank and spread itself slowly over the surrounding country. And the touch of that vapour, the inhaling of its pungent wisps, was death to all that breathes.
Black smoke!
It was heavy, this vapour, heavier than the densest smoke, so that, after the first tumultuous uprush and overflow of its impact, it sank down through the air and poured over the ground in a manner rather liquid than gaseous, abandoning the hills, and streaming into the valleys and ditches and watercourses, even as I have heard the carbonic acid gas that pours from the volcanic clefts is wont to do. And where it came upon water, some chemical action occurred, and the surface would be instantly covered with a powdery scum that sank slowly and made way for more. The scum was absolutely insoluble, and it is a strange thing, seeing the instant effect of the gas, that one could drink without hurt the water from which it had been strained. The vapour did not diffuse as a true gas would do. It hung together in banks, flowing sluggishly down the slope of the land and driving reluctantly before the wind. And very slowly it combined with the mist and moisture of the air, and sank to the earth in the form of dust. Save that an unknown element giving a group of 4 lines in the blue of the spectrum is concerned, we are still entirely ignorant of the nature of this substance.
If any of you study atomic physics listening, you may be like, well, yeah, of course I understand what the 4 lines in a blue of a spectrum means, but I had no idea what that means, and I'm assuming I'm not the only one doing that. I mean, at least I hope I'm not the only one. Anyway, I went away, and it turns out that it's part of a thing called the Balmer series. So a scientist called Johann Balmer came up with this visible spectrum from which you can look at hydrogen atoms. So on the left is blue, and on the right is red, and there are these different spectrums of strands to show the different atomic structure of an element being like the basic material that you can get, you know, like gold, silver, frankincense, myrrh, no, not the last two. So basically it means that they don't know what it is, and he's using the science of the day to be like, oh, well, unless we can use a science experiment to figure it out, we're gonna be not knowing what it is, right? Which is peak Wells.
Once the tumultuous upheaval of its dispersion was over, The black smoke clung so closely to the ground, even before its precipitation, that 50 feet up in the air, on the roofs and upper stories of high houses and on great trees, there was a chance of escaping its poison altogether, as was proved even that night at Street Cobham and Ditton.
Hey, everybody, come on, get off Street Cobham. Everyone from Ditton, look, their gas weapons are crap. I think we're going to win this, apart from all the death that's happened as a result of the gas when it immediately fell. Oh, right, that's a bit disrespectful, sorry.
The man who escaped at the former place tells a wonderful story of the strangeness of its coiling flow, and how he looked from the church spire and saw the houses of the village rising like ghosts out of its inky nothingness. For a day and a half he remained there, weary, starving and sun-scorched. The earth under the blue sky against the prospect of the distant hills a velvet black expanse, with red roofs, green trees and, later, black veiled shrubs and gates, barns, outhouses and walls, rising here and there into the sunlight.
It was a wonderful story. My wife and children dead. Me trapped in a house.
But that was at Street Cobham, where the black vapour was allowed to remain until it sank of its own accord into the ground. As a rule, the Martians, when it had served its purpose, cleared the air of it again by wading into it and directing a jet of steam upon it.
To be honest, that's pretty considerate of the Martians. They're all right. They're cleaning as they go. It's polite. If nothing else, you don't see humans doing that when they attack somewhere, do you? No, the Red Cross have to come in afterwards most of the time. I'm going to chalk that up as a win for the Martians. So I'm going to put Martians 4, humans 0.
This they did with the vapour banks near us, as we saw in the starlight from the window of a deserted house at Upper Halliford, whither we had returned. From there, we could see the searchlights on Richmond Hill and Kingston Hill going to and fro. And about 11, the windows rattled, and we heard the sound of huge siege guns that had been put in position there. These continued intermittently for the space of a quarter of an hour, sending chance shots at the invisible Martians at Hampton and Ditton, and then the pale beams of the electric light vanished, and were replaced by a bright red glow. Then the fourth cylinder fell, a brilliant green meteor, as I learned afterwards, in Bushy Park. Before the guns on the Richmond and Kingston line of hills began, there was a fitful cannonade far away in the southwest, due, I believe, to guns being fired haphazard before the black vapour could overwhelm the gunners. So, setting about it as methodically as men might smoke out a wasp's nest, the Martians spread this strange stifling vapour over the Londonwood country. The animals humans are compared to this chapter is bees and wasps. Bees and wasps. Thanks, bees and wasps. The horns of the crescent slowly moved apart, until at last they formed a line from Hanwell to Coombe and Malden. All night through their destructive tubes advanced. After the Martian at St. George's Hill was brought down, did they give the artillery the ghost of a chance against them? Wherever there was a possibility of guns being laid for them unseen, a fresh canister of the black vapour was discharged, and where the guns were openly displayed, the heat ray was brought to bear.
So we've had an excellent mention of Wells's encyclopedic knowledge from the southwest into London. It's always a treat to hear that, and with that, I thought I'd introduce our guest musical comedian for today. So this chapter, we have Amelia Baylor, who is a Glaswegian-based musical comedian who does sort of rave, pop-punky, electro stuff, and it's a really great song. We have a little chat with her, and then we'll hear it afterwards.
Thank you so much for making a song for the show. It's amazing. It is a legitimate banger. You do music that's like musical comedy, but also within the pop punk genre, like that you wouldn't necessarily say is musical comedy, even though it's funny. How do you approach making a song?
So there's a few different ways, actually. Like sometimes, I've started doing like a Twitch stream where I make songs live on the stream, and that's really helped me to like make the process like quite quick, because normally I'll be doing it on the stream, there's people watching, and sometimes there's two ways that I mainly write musical comedy, and that is either I'll just sing to myself like a little hook. So I wrote a song about Wimpy on the show, and it's one of my favorite songs I've written live on the stream, and I just was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if there's a song about Wimpy? And I was like, where do you wanna go for breakfast? Wimpy, Wimpy, Wimpy. I went there, went there, went there, went there, went there, went there, went there. I went there, went there, went there, went there, went there, went there, went. And like, I think that's the best way to write comedy songs. Sometimes is writing a hook without the music.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes the low key, quite cheesy sounds on GarageBand lend themselves really well to like musical comedy. But yeah, so sometimes I'll start by coming up with the melody and then working out what that melody is afterwards in GarageBand.
Sure,
or I make the actual backing track first by using the same. I always use 80s backbeat because it's just really simple, and then I'll get like a synth and I'll come up with a little dee 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 kind of thing, and then I'll loop that like 8 times, and then after that I'll just come up with a melody like "Super Love It So Much" or something, like shout it, just something really dumb. For me, like the Surrey song, I was thinking I'll make it like, because you said, okay, I've sent you a chapter, take inspiration from the chapter. The first line or the title of it was "What Happened in Surrey," and I thought that's like what happens in Vegas. So I'm gonna make it like Surrey is like Las Vegas, and like this stuff is happening in Surrey. I don't know, and then I just sort of like went from there.
I wanted to ask you. So a lot of your live, like you were saying, your Twitch streams and stuff is snacks. As you have snack, you're big on snacks. Pizza, yes, please. More pizza. All right. In the book, they actually talk about snacks. They don't call them snacks, but they have to take provisions at a point. And the food that they chose to take is salted meat and biscuits. What would you take if you had to leave your house to escape from Martian invasion?
I would take, those white chocolate dipped Oreos? That's not. I don't. What am I saying? Oreos. Yeah. Why am I saying Oreos? I saw them in Home Bargains the other day, and I once bought them when I was in Paris, darling. But I thought that you could only get them in, like, I don't know. I thought you could only get them when you're abroad. But turns out they sell them
in Paris.
Yeah, weirdly, I was like, I've only seen these in Paris, darling. But they're in my local Home Bargains. So I go there, stock up on like 4 boxes of them, I think would be enough. Do I need a secondary one? Maybe I would also take drumstick squashies. They are the best sweet ever. I'm like, they're very new, and I'm just excited that it was our generation. Do you know what I mean? Like, they could have arrived on this universe when we'd died already, but they didn't.
Have you ever been to Surrey?
Yes, I have. So
never heard someone so excited to go to Surrey.
Because I used to, as a kid, so I moved to Scotland when I was 9, but I used to live in Wimbledon. Right. God, I sound so edgy. Hi, I'm Amelia, and I'm from Wimbledon. God, I can't believe I used to open gigs in Glasgow with that and wonder why I died on my arse.
What happened in Surrey? It all kicked off in Surrey. Surrey was mentioned in a War of the Worlds chapter, so Surrey is really cool. Someone said, "Where you going on holiday?" And I said, "Sorry." And they said, "You're sorry for what?" I said, "No, I'm genuinely going to Surrey on holiday." Sorry, 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 sorry. Where are you going on your weekend away? I am going to Surrey. Where are you going on your holiday? I'm going to Surrey because it once was mentioned in a chapter of War of the Worlds, so it's cool. What happened in Surrey? It all kicked off in Surrey. A very boring Wikipedia page, but still we're gonna go there to spend the day. Sometimes people say, like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, what happens in Surrey stays in Surrey.
By midnight, the blazing trees along the slopes of Richmond Park and the glare of Kingston Hill threw their light upon a network of black smoke, blotting out the whole valley of the Thames and extending as far as the eye could reach. And through this, 2 Martians slowly waded and turned their hissing steam jets this way and that. They were sparing of the heat ray that night, either because they had but a limited supply of material for its production, or because they did not wish to destroy the country but only to crush and overawe the opposition that they had aroused. In the latter aim they certainly succeeded. Sunday night was the end of the organised opposition to their movement. After that, no body of men would stand against them. So hopeless was their enterprise. Even the crews of the torpedo boats and destroyers that had brought their quick firers up the Thames refused to stop, mutinied and went down again. The only offensive operation men ventured upon after that night was the preparation of mines and pitfalls, and even in that their energies were frantic and spasmodic. One has to imagine, as well as one may, the fate of those batteries towards Esher, waiting so tensely in the twilight. Survivors there were none. One may picture the orderly expectation, the officers alert and watchful, the gunners ready, the ammunition piled to hand, the limber gunners with their horses and wagons, the group of civilian spectators standing as near as they were permitted, the evening stillness, the ambulances and hospital tents with the burned and wounded from Weybridge, then the dull resonance of the shots the Martians fired, and the clumsy projectile whirling over trees and houses and smashing amid the neighbouring fields.
I just want to take a minute to recognise that what a scene he's painted there. That is like look, I'm putting my my sarcasm and my irony in a box to just earnestly say that's like really good, isn't it? It's good, great work. Thumbs up there. I think this deserves to be a classic.
One may picture, too, the sudden shifting of the attention, the swiftly spreading coils and bellyings of that blackness advancing headlong, towering heavenward, turning the twilight to a palpable darkness. A strange and horrible antagonist of vapour striding upon its victims. Men and horses near it seen dimly, running, shrieking, falling headlong, shouts of dismay, the guns suddenly abandoned, men choking and writhing on the ground, and the swift broadening out of the opaque cone of smoke, and then night and extinction of nothing but a silent mass of impenetrable vapour hiding its dead.
I mean, that paragraph was even better than the one before! You're on a roll, Herbie G!
Before dawn, the black vapour was pouring through the streets of Richmond, and the disintegrating organism of government was, with a last expiring effort, rousing the population of London to the necessity of flight.
And there you have it, guys. Chapter 15. Do you think they're going to get to London? I don't know. They seem pretty keen on it. Let's have a look at what the next chapter's called. The Exodus of London. Right, so I'm pretty sure they're going to get to London. And that's going to be pretty action-packed, I'm sure. So thank you so much for listening to this chapter. And I can't wait to see you with the next one. Big thank you to everybody who was on this episode. We had Tom Burgess. You can follow him at tomb_urges on Twitter. He also has a fantastic podcast he's making with retired children's TV producer Peter Fleming. He's just finished the first series and it is amazing. Thank you to Amelia Baylor for that fantastic song, What Happened in Surrey. And also you had a little sneaky peek of the sort of music that she makes on her Twitch streams. You can follow her on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. It's all Amelia Baylor. There'll be a little link in the notes, so be sure to check it there. She also has a Patreon you can subscribe to. Speaking of Patreons you can subscribe to, Loremen podcast as well. Thank you very much to Alistair Beckett-King and James Shakeshaft for coming along and talking all of the spooky noises of yore. So Loremen podcast, it's out every week. It's really funny and also an insight into British superstition. Now you can follow them at Loremen Pod on Twitter. You can also follow Alistair Beckett-King at Mr. ABK. He's got very funny videos he does on there where he talks about being a hat nonce all the time. There's also the other half, the yin to the yang of Loremen, which is James Shakeshaft at James Shakeshaft. Lastly, please do rate and review the podcast on whatever app you have and share it on social media. I don't have a Patreon for this. It takes hours of work and it means the world to me that you guys are listening, and I'd love to have more people listening to it too. Please share the word out for it. You can follow me at Edy Hurst on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook to get with the latest dates. Again, send me an email if you want, edyhurst@gmail.com. And thank you so much. I'll see you next time for Chapter 16, The Exodus from London.